All right, we're going to kick this off. So, welcome. We are so glad that you are joining us today and commend you for being proactive when it comes to trying to seek out resources to support your child in school. This is an opportune time, being that school has already started for some districts and will be starting soon for other districts. Let's go ahead and do some introductions. Slide.
Hi, I'm glad everybody's here. My name is Richard Isaacs. I'm an attorney with California Special Needs Law Group. I've been practicing for just over 15 years. I'm also a board member of the Jonathan Foundation. It's a wonderful organization that provides free psychoeducation assessments for students and their families who can't afford them. And this is such a good opportunity at the beginning of the school year to talk about the difference between advocates and attorneys and the different roles that we each play.
Awesome. Slide. Hi, everyone. I am Sarah Baum. Just a little bit of background on me. So I was an education specialist in public school districts in Southern California for about 8 years. My master's in special education. When I decided to go into advocacy, I did some advocacy training. So the COPAC training that you see is one of the programs I did that was pretty rigorous. And I am the proud owner of Empower You Advocacy. Slide. Oh, yes, we can. That's fine. Housekeeping items. So, as you may have heard, this meeting is being recorded. Within about a week or so, we will probably have the video available on both of our websites. If you there's a survey link that's in the chat for you to fill out after our webinar to let us know any feedback you may have. That will have our website links. And so please tell your friends if they weren't able to make this. There's the survey. If they weren't able to attend live, then they can access it on our websites. And also we have Rosa Varela, who is a law clerk about to become an attorney with Rich's office. She is helping with some of the logistics of our meeting. So we're really happy to have her here. And then we want you to know as we go through the webinar today, there might be things that you have clarifying questions about. Please feel free to type those in the chat and we will get to that at the end of our presentation. And then Rich, you want to talk about, we have people attending from all over the country, which is pretty awesome.
Right. So, I'm an attorney in California. Sarah's an advocate in California. So we're going to come at this from the California angle. This isn't legal advice. This is just general information, just about the IEPs and, advocates and attorneys and the different roles that we play. If you have specific legal advice, definitely reach out to an attorney and set up a consultation to address those specific questions. Any questions you have for the chat, also try not to be too specific. General questions help everybody. We don't need school districts or names or anything like that.
Slide. All right, so this is what we feel like most parents probably feel like when they see their child's assessment report or IEP, or they're given like a 50-page docket of their procedural safeguards. The system's really stacked against parents when it comes to special education. That's why professions like this. So, Rich, do you want to talk about like kind of the map that Homer's looking at?
Yeah, I think this is a really good picture of how complex the IEP process is. And, one of the things that we see is the different professionals, they're all looking at different maps. And, you know, what we're really trying to do is what's the starting point and where are we going and how do we navigate that? And the role of an advocate or an attorney is to, you know, really choose a course, design the course to get through the complications as easy as possible.
Absolutely. So like, is everybody understanding and looking at the same map? Are they able to read the map? And then something that is one of the really important things we want you to take away from this is that it is your right as the parents to meaningfully participate in the development of your child's education. So we'll talk more about what that looks like in later slides, but you know, that means for you, not just understanding the map, but also being able to help draw the map. Now we know that everybody at the IEP table is an expert on something or other, but you are the expert on your child, and that's why your input is so essential. Slide. All right, so why is this so difficult for parents? Like I said before, the system's not user-friendly at all. Essentially, you have like these three different worlds colliding. So you have education is one of them. You know, unless you went through a teaching credential program, like you're not going to understand the ins and outs of Common Core, you know, lesson planning, how to teach things like reading, that sort of thing. And then we have the legal component.
Yeah, you know, and with on the law side, it's one of the most complicated areas of law. Most of you are probably familiar with the Individuals with Disability Education Act. That's, you know, the statute that creates the IEPs, which all the states have adopted. And then we have the regulations which implement that, which is complicated in of itself and goes into more, you know, specifics. And then we have the state education codes and the state regulations and the government code and the health and welfare code. And, you know, there's all these laws that tie into education that school districts have to abide by. It's too complicated, you know, and a lot of times for them to understand all the complexities. It's complicated for families. So you're putting this set of laws on, you know, on the school district and the families to understand, so they make sure that they follow things accordingly. And it does become difficult, and that's why the map is so confusing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I feel like as a special ed teacher, like I felt like my master's program and credential program like really equipped me to understand the laws. And then like when I did advocacy training, I was like, oh, I don't like there was so much I didn't know. So super complex. Then we have disabilities themselves, also super complex. Under IDEA, there are 13 different categories of disability that a child can qualify for to receive special education services. And in order to qualify, there's this kind of like two-pronged test where, first of all, schools don't diagnose. So that's always super confusing for parents. But a lot of times the criteria is the same as a diagnosis, but not only must they meet certain criteria for a diagnostic type criteria, but then it also has to affect their education. Their disability has to affect their education. So sometimes we'll see kiddos that have a medical diagnosis of autism, but they don't qualify for special education services. And that can be very confusing and a point of, you know, disagreement between parents and schools. Then you add a layer of emotional investment. So even if you have expertise in all three areas, your kid, you know, I have a 14-year-old and he's still my baby, and like mama bear would come out if, you know, I feel like somebody's not doing right by my child. So like I've represented advocates who do have expertise in all three areas, but when it comes to your own kid, it is so hard to be objective.
And adding to that, I think this is a really good picture too. And, you know, it's not just parents who feel this way. You know, the school district team can oftentimes feel this when we talk about the different disabilities. There are 13 eligibility categories, but there's a host, tons of subcategories. And you're going to have different
Mhm.
specialists, right? You're going to have AT, speech and language, OT, and they know a little bit of the other professions, but they don't know a lot. So you have all these players that are looking at just their individual expertise, but how does it all fit together with the education, and the different curriculums, and how does it fit together with the law side? And then you're right, with that emotion. And it can be so overwhelming. As you mentioned, you worked, with helped families who are in the education as well. In our office, we've worked with school board members, superintendents, different admin teachers, um, everybody who needs help, because when it's your own child, it's really, really difficult to step aside and try to understand and navigate the process when you're just filled with so much emotion and there's so much happening. And I think that's really a strong reason to bring in, an advocate who can help lower the temperature and explain things.
Absolutely. Slide. All right, so here we have Gru. I love Despicable Me. It doesn't have any money. I think a lot of us can relate. Everything's so expensive. Again, we're from California, Southern California, and like gas is outrageous, like housing prices, food, it's like everything is so much more expensive than it used to be. So, we wanted to provide some guidance to our community through this webinar by kind of explaining like a continuum of your options when it comes to cost for advocating for your kiddo. Slide. Okay, so as you can see, this continuum goes from no cost to low to mid cost and then mid to high cost. And then again, we have some resources linked in the chat. If you don't see that, let me know. We'll make sure we add those. But one of those is has all these different websites that we have vetted that are really good sources, and those are all free. So I think something that a lot of parents don't realize is that somebody doesn't see it. Rosa, are you able to add that link? If not, we can add it at the end. Just make sure you stay with us the whole time.
I'm not able to right now.
Okay, we'll do it at the end. So initial consultations, the majority of advocates and attorneys are going to do initial consultations for free. And Rich, you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, I think that, the initial consultation piece is a really important aspect of any representation. And, our firm, we really try hard to have a meaningful consultation, meaning we want you to send us the documents. We're going to review the documents in advance. And this is all no charge. So we can have a substantive conversation so you can walk away with a better understanding of what your rights are, some courses of action, some things that you might be able to do. Advocates are going to do the same thing. Our hope is always that you can walk away and not hire an attorney. And there are oftentimes
Right.
we'll say, why don't, you can work with an advocate. Or there are times that, we may be able to point you in the direction of somebody at the school district who could get involved, kind of help the IEP team figure out some issues. Or we can send, like, here's some draft language that you can send that's going to move things forward. And, sometimes that solves it completely and we feel great about it. Other times, it might be 6 months, 9 months later, another, hiccup happens or something, and then the family will do a second consultation. I wish I could spend my whole career just doing consultations and pointing people in the right direction. So that initial consultation is a key piece.
Mm-hmm. And again, some attorneys do charge, most don't. Some advocates do charge, most don't. Take advantage of that. You do not need to, and that might be the wrong links. You're under no obligation to hire that person. Just know that. If they try to do a hard sell. Then there's website resources, which hopefully I shared the right link. If not, just know that after this presentation, you'll be emailed a message from Zoom, and those links will be included there. They were also included in the like reminder emails that you should have gotten for the meeting. So we'll make sure we get those to you. And then there's nonprofit agencies. Some of those are in the website resources, Google Doc that we shared. There's also bartering, which is more unusual, but for example, I have a client that she's never paid me, but she is a professional photographer. So she has done professional photos of me, and in exchange, I've provided advocacy services. So like if you or your spouse have some sort of specialized skill, if you're a contractor or carpenter, you know, hairdresser, like it doesn't hurt to ask, like, hey, can I exchange my services for yours? If you're going to do that, I wouldn't exchange hours for hours. I would exchange the specific services so that you don't run over those hours and have to charge extra. But yeah, that can be an option to get an advocate or an attorney if they're open to it, and if you don't have the money for it. And then we have networking. So social media is a great resource. There are a lot of groups out there. I would encourage parents to use the social media groups as a way of kind of emotional validation, social connection. Use the groups for referrals, but be careful about asking specific advice about your child's case, because anybody can answer, and things might have been a certain way for their child, but that might not apply to your child. And you want to talk
And
about
another,
the cost? Oh, go ahead.
yeah. Yeah, just to add to that too, you know, in California, you're going to have the community advisory committees, the CAC.
Oh, right.
That's a great resource, and different districts, you know, handle them differently. But that's a great resource of tying the school district and the special ed, you know, community and the parents together. They often do monthly, you know, presentations, trainings, and as a parent, if you have a question, you can reach out to some of the parents on the board of the CAC. They're a great resource. They can point you in different directions as well. They can also, you know, they know the families, and they can, you know, have somebody go to an IEP meeting with you, which can really help. Just having you know, another parent sitting next to you, asking questions, who, you know, who's looking at things a little bit differently and isn't so emotionally involved. So that's a really good resource. The low to mid cost. There are trainings that you can do. There's some, you know, seminars and stuff like that. I know the national COPA. It's going to be in Irvine this next year in 2025. That costs money. There's other trainings, if you Google it, that's going to just give you more information. You know, I'll speak at different events and seminars, and it's interesting, you know, I'll have different special ed teachers or even special ed directors attend, and some of the questions that I get are great questions, but it's a little eye-opening that they don't know that they haven't had that training. And I think, Sarah, as you mentioned, you know, going through school and everything and all of your education stuff, you learn, you know, a little bit, but it's not specific. So just remember, don't just assume the district knows everything. They don't, not their fault. They just don't, especially when it comes to the, you know, how to navigate the complexities of the IEP. You know, advocates, attorneys, they charge differently. You're going to have to ask those questions when you do the consultations. There are payment plans. I know that our firm, you know, if we can help and make a difference, we don't want to waste anybody's time, but there are definitely times where a payment plan makes sense. And again, it just goes to communication and clarity. The mid to high costs, the same thing. There's going to be trainings that can cost a lot more. Sarah, you went through the SEAT training, which is a special education advocacy training put on by COPA. That cost, and it's a long program. It's a great program.
Yeah.
There are advocates, you know, just like anything else, there's advocates that have been doing this 30 years, and they're excellent at what they do, and they're going to charge accordingly. And attorneys, you know, it's expensive to run a firm and to, you know, pay employees and all that. So attorneys are going to charge different rates too, but it's obviously going to be more expensive than working with an advocate.
Slide. All right, so some differences between advocates and attorneys. So here's something really important for you guys to know. Advocates, it's kind of like the wild, wild west, right? Right now. There's no official certification process, there's no training. With an attorney, you know that they went to law school, you know they passed the bar, you know that they're accountable to the bar. Advocates don't have that. So it's really important, and we'll talk about this in some of the next slides, to really make sure you're vetting your advocate to make sure that they're competent and that they're going to do a good job by your child and get you the results that you're seeking. Yeah, so essentially advocates, they guide you through the IEP process, educate and empower parents at the IEP table. My goal for my clients is to teach them about their rights, and then to kind of model for them, um, what kind of language gets results from the district, how to advocate for yourself at the IEP meeting so that I can equip them to advocate for themselves in a way that's effective. Um, Advocates can negotiate with the district on your behalf. In some states, advocates can even represent parents at due process hearings. California is not one of those states, and even if I could, I would never want to do that because you're going against an attorney. So be careful if you have an advocate that says, that they can represent you at due process. And then this is important. Advocates are familiar with education laws. They should be, but they're not legal experts. They cannot interpret laws. They cannot legally advise you.
And, talking about the attorneys, as it says here, attorneys can handle, simple cases to the very complex, and they have a deeper understanding of the litigation process. And, for those of you who aren't familiar, in California, the first step of a legal action with the school district in special ed matters is going to be filing what we call a due process complaint. And that's with the Office of Administrative Hearings, which is the administrative court. There's no discovery, there's no depositions. It's a simpler process, but it's still a hearing, and there's still witnesses, and you still put on evidence. And then after that, there's the appeal process if that's the course that it goes. And an attorney can handle all of that. They're able to seek recovery of the legal fees, and that's really important, not to throw a complexity to the discussion. Because special education law falls under civil rights, if you were to go to due process and prevail, you have the right to seek recovery of your legal fees. Because of that, and again, we're lucky in California that this is all up for negotiation. In settlements, school districts will often pay a percentage of the fees. How much really just depends on the strength of the case, and if the likelihood of going to hearing versus everything else. It just becomes part of the negotiation. When it comes to the legal fees, I truly believe in, we need advocates, and we have to have advocates. Not everybody needs an attorney, but I really feel that everybody would benefit from having an advocate just to help them navigate the process. You're going to have a better IEP by having an advocate. And part of that is you're going to develop more specific goals. You're going to develop more goals. You're going to bring in specialists that can help really develop present levels with clear expectations. And that's just how it's going to happen, having an advocate. Not everybody needs an attorney, but at some point, and I know, Sarah, we'll get into this a little bit. At some point, when do you switch over to an attorney, or where do you just bring an attorney on? And I really think that's where the consultations start, asking the questions during those those consultations. And we'll get to like that handover, or when you should go directly to an attorney. There are times where it makes sense, where you don't want to spend $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on an advocate if it's going to go legal, and you have a chance to recover those legal fees. So that's all part of the communication and the conversation that you're going to have. But there's definitely a role for attorneys. But I truly believe there's an absolute role for good advocates to get involved.
We have a question in the chat right now that I think, Rich, would be good for you. Will you be able to give an example of when a parent might file a due process complaint later? Well, when would the
Yeah.
due process complaint?
Yeah, so a due process complaint really happens when you hit that impasse, when you've been working with the IEP meeting and you just can't get that meeting of the minds. And so where the district has done something, let's say that your child, just by example, is 3 or 4 grade levels behind, or your child's coming home and they're crying every day, and they have so much school anxiety because of how far behind they are, or other things in their program that's not appropriate. And you just can't agree on a placement. You can't agree on how do we make up for that lack of education. At that point, if there's violations of the law, a denial of faith, and you have clear evidence to support that, then the only tool that we have is to file a due process complaint. And we file a lot of due process complaints because that sets a deadline for the school. They're either going to work with you, they're going to resolve the case with you, or they're going to have to go defend themselves at hearing and justify why your child's struggling so much and they haven't made any substantive changes, right? So our goal is always to resolve it. I truly think that if anything goes to hearing, it's a failure. Where do we fail? How do we not get together and figure this out? And another thing to remember, about 94% or so of all special ed cases in California do resolve outside of a hearing. And I think there's about 1,000 of 1,500 cases a month being filed, which means those are lawsuits against school districts for special education, concerns. But 94% are resolving, and that's really where we focus our time. Ideally, with an advocate, is you can avoid that litigation, that you can, especially if you get an advocate early, where they can help navigate the process. And that benefits everybody. It keeps litigation costs down. It keeps the attorneys out of it. It saves the district money. And it really prevents the families from struggling, for so long before they need that help of an attorney.
Slide. All right, so some considerations when hiring an advocate. Like I mentioned before, because advocates aren't really accountable to any overseeing agency, you want to vet them very carefully. I've heard horror stories of parents who have hired advocates, getting charged thousands of dollars and like nothing changes with their child's IEP. Anybody could wake up tomorrow, hang up a shingle and say, hey, I'm an advocate and I'm going to charge $300 an hour. So again, like when you're having that initial consult, there's some good questions to ask. So first of all, you want to know a little bit about their background. Generally speaking, most advocates either are parents that have a child with a disability, so they went through the IEP process with their child. And so they know it well, and they realized, hey, I'm pretty good at this. I want to help other parents to be able to advocate for their kids. Or sometimes you'll have someone who worked in the school system like me, and kind of like behind the scenes, I'm advocating for my families and I'm calling them after IEP meetings and I'm saying, hey, like you should have asked for, ask for this, or here's why this meeting went this way, or that sort of thing. And they become kind of disillusioned with how the system is stacked against parents. And so they decide to go into advocacy. Now, there are exceptions, but generally speaking, like you're going to want to have an advocate who falls in one of those two camps. Either they're a parent that has a child with a disability, or they have some sort of special education background. You also want to know, is this going to be a good fit? So personality wise, you should be able to get a feel for the person at the initial consult and kind of see like if you're looking for a more aggressive, kind of bulldozing into meetings type of advocate, I'm probably not the advocate for you. I have like a strong but collaborative approach. So if you kind of see that you're aligned in that sense, that's something that you want to look for. And then keep in mind too, you're going to be sharing really sometimes intimate and vulnerable details about your life, about your kid. And so you want to be able to really trust that person. It's almost like a therapist relationship in a way. You want to like feel safe with that person and feel like they're not judging you and they're just there to support you. That's super important. As far as values, you could always ask them like, hey, what are your core values as an advocate? And I think a lot of times that would catch someone off guard, but it's kind of a good indicator, you know, like one advocate might say, you know, I want to win for my client. I want to beat the school district. I want to, you know, and kind of more like aggressive approach. And then somebody else might say, you know, it's really important to me that my client's child gets what they need educationally and is able to make progress and gets the education they deserve. So advocates, because they're not attorneys, they can practice in any state. And we're seeing a lot more of that as people are doing more virtual services. So that's kind of your call to make. Personally, I only advocate in my county because I think it's really important to know special ed directors and know my school district so I can form collaborative relationships with them. And I know what state complaints have been filed, you know, that sort of thing. So I kind of know how to navigate those really well. There's other advocates that will, you know, they're in Mississippi and they'll advocate for somebody in Texas. And that might be at a reduced rate. What you do want to know is that advocate familiar with my state regulations? Are they familiar with case law for whatever circuit I'm in? Because if they're not, they might not be giving you the correct guidance. Personally, I think it's important for advocates to have a contract. It's just good business. And, you know, then you know the expectations of what they will and will not do. And then lastly, I think it's really important to ask the advocate, do you have any attorneys you work with? Because like Rich was saying, sometimes you find yourself in meeting after meeting after meeting with an advocate. Maybe they're doing all the right things, but your kid's not making the progress they need to make. And you're basically hitting your head against the wall. And there's some advocates out there that they'll just keep going to meetings and nothing changes. And then in the meantime, the kid is falling further and further behind. So you need to know as an advocate what your professional limits are and when it's time to pass it off to an attorney who can file for due process. And it's also important to know that they network with other professionals. I have like my, you know, professional tribe of different, you know, psychologists or speech language pathologists, etc., that I can, if I don't know the answer to something, then I can get it for you from someone who does know. Slide.
And considerations when hiring an attorney, I'm going to talk about advocates too here. Sarah, you touched on some really, really key things. You know, when you're looking for an advocate, there's such a benefit that they can work directly with the school district. They have relationships, and that it's very helpful because they can bring in the right players. They're also not emotionally involved. You know, if you're working with an advocate or seeking an advocate that gets real emotional, you know, and together you're just raising each other's emotions and anxiety. I don't find that as helpful as, you know, our clients there's so much going on and there's so much anxiety and there's so much frustration, you know, and like you said, with the counseling component, it is, you become a really close person, you know, relationship wise as you're going through the process. But the role of an advocate or an attorney is to negotiate, find the path and negotiate with the district and get the best resolution. It's not to be clouded by anything else. You know, and another thing is an attorney, some districts are going to get an attorney and they're going to try to keep us from talking with the district. So we can only work through their counsel. An advocate doesn't have that hindrance. An advocate can always contact and work with the district. They can't break that. And I think that's a real valuable thing. going back to the considerations with an attorney, the initial consultation being meaningful, as I touched on, it's really key. I just like anything else, I think you should interview a lot of people. I don't think you should, have conversations. You're gonna kind of see what feels right, the response, just how you connect. And that goes to the personality. My personality is pretty calm. I really try to calm the situation. There's enough stress. As a firm, we really want to take as much stress off the shoulders of parents as we can. We can't change what's happened, but we can, by taking the stress off, we achieve that by really understanding what's going on and putting a path forward that we can get through, that's going to start making these changes and you're going to start seeing these positive changes with the IEP team, the services, placement, or whatever. But personality is key. We work, our cases, even though it's fast in terms of litigation, they still take 9 months to 18 months to work through. You have to go through assessments, you have to get experts involved, go through IEP meetings, then there's, filing the complaint, going to mediation. Most of that, or a lot of that's us kind of moving things forward and just consulting with the families, and that does take a lot of pressure off. And then the cost, again, when hiring an attorney, I'd really want to know how much this is going to cost. And, we can't gauge, is it going to take 50 hours or 150 hours? But we have an idea. I mean, I can look at any IEP and your concerns and decide, okay, well, what information do we need? Where do we go get it? And how are we going to go get that information? And then how do we present that to the school? And if we have to file, what's that look like? So we can guesstimate what the next 12 months are going to be, as we formulate this strategy. What we generally do, because I think communication's key, is clearly outline, okay, well, here's what the next 3 months are going to look like. Stop. Let's talk about it. Okay, here's what the next 3 months are going to look like. And just chunk it so nobody feels overwhelmed. And, some of the things would just be asking the questions of, how often do you invoice? And if I have concerns, can I address them? Because we don't want anybody having concerns and not addressing it. Communication and trust is key, and you build that. You build the trust by clear communication. And then the other thing is there are some really aggressive attorneys. Thank goodness, there are families that need those attorneys, and there's some really aggressive advocates. I find if our job is to go get the information and present it to the district in such a way that they want to jump on board with it. And if not, okay, then we have the litigation process, and we can handle that process. Ideally, an advocate is going to get the right information, present it to a district, and they accept it. When we get cases from an advocate that are well set up, all that's done, they just hit that last step and like, okay, well, it's really set up for that. And just, Sarah, like I said, if you're finding an advocate that just goes to meeting after meeting after meeting, that's a problem. That's a problem. My personal view is, we make a request once, maybe twice, but then we move forward. We're not going to sit here and play games. Your child doesn't have time. So those are the questions that you can ask an attorney and an advocate: is how long do your cases take? What's the role here? Oftentimes you'll find you build such a strong relationship that you'll find an advocate that you like, and you'll hang on to them for 12 years, until your child's out. And just, hey, I need you at each annual IEP meeting. They're going to resolve the big issues, but they're going to be there if you have questions. And I think that those are the relationships that we love the most, those long relationships we have with families. And I know advocates have such a strong bond with their families.
Absolutely. Like they become like family. Slide. Okay. So you might be asking yourself, when do I reach out? Personally, I think reaching out early is best case scenario. You can think of it this way, like taking your car in for services, or going to the dentist, or going for your physical, right? You're getting little, you're getting like during the consultation, you're getting the IEP checked out. And if you're taking your child for their well visit to the doctor, either the doctor's going to say, hey, everything's on track, they're developing great, totally healthy, see you next year, or they might detect some issues, in which case they're going to need to do some additional things. Same thing with advocacy, and you might think, hey, like, I love my kids' IEP team. They're so nice, and generally speaking, people go into education because they have a heart for helping kids. So this isn't anything against educators or anyone on the IEP team, but sometimes things get missed. Sometimes processes aren't followed, and then the child suffers. So that's kind of where we come in, because we're trained to look for and find those things, so that your child has a better education. I don't know, I had a recent case, and I think she's watching this webinar, but these parents had this son who was 4 years old, and they just felt like they had been getting nowhere with the district. They didn't feel listened to. They felt very frustrated. And because they came in so early, within a couple of weeks, we were able to get everything resolved, like through an IEP meeting, requested evaluations. And now he's on a good track. And I reached out to them to see if I could support them this school year. And they kind of said, like, hey, we got it from here, which is like music to my ears, because hopefully we've changed his trajectory. Like, that's the best case scenario for me. If your child is older, there might be more complications, and there might have been more years of them falling behind, which could mean that the services are going to be more expensive, more complicated, and cause your child to fall even further behind.
Yeah, it's never a wrong time to reach out. It's just getting, it's the consultation isn't a commitment. And as I said earlier, you're going to have a better IEP working with somebody who knows the process, who's been to, hundreds, thousands of IEPs, and understands what questions to ask, and, understands how to develop goals. And, advocates generally are just amazing at that. That's their venue, is the IEP meetings. We go to IEP meetings as a step. We usually get involved when the IEP is just not, when we have to, but we're really working beyond that. But for an advocate, they're just, it's their place, and they're so good, and you're going to have a better IEP. Not everybody obviously has to hire an advocate, but it's never the wrong time to reach out to one.
It's so true. And then, reach out if your child's struggling educationally and something needs to change. And a lot of times, people hear education, including school staff members, they think academics only. It's not just academics. It could be social, emotional issues. It could be, pragmatics, meaning social communication. It could mean, emotional issues, like, so just be aware that if your child's struggling at school, doesn't have to just be academics, and that might be the time to reach out for a consult.
Yeah, we see a lot of anxiety. I would say if anything now, and that needs to be addressed. If your child has anxiety and they have an IEP, or if they don't, we can look at eligibility, because it's impacting their education. And like you said, not just academic, it's that social emotional piece.
Absolutely.
And the whole purpose of the IDEA, when Congress authorized it way back when, was to make sure that the students are prepared for further education, for employability, and independent living. And that encompasses more than just academics. That really is that whole person, that how to communicate, you have the social skills. And so there's having those consultations with somebody who knows, the purpose of the IEP, I think, is really helpful. The last thing here is, do not simply trust the IEP team. And I'm not saying this, or we're not saying this in a bad way, but that would be like just getting one opinion and going, and not a second opinion from a doctor, or a third opinion. And it's not disrespecting anybody. It's just, you need other opinions. And I really believe that, for the parents and the families that we work with, they know when it's not working. And if they're not being heard by the IEP team, with exceptions, it's not on purpose. The IEP team is so busy. The teachers, it's one of the most unrewarding professions now, right? When you look at job satisfaction, and it used to not be that way, but caseloads are maxed. Parents are upset. They keep changing curriculum. They don't have the trainings, and yet they're still expected to show up every day and have great results. It's hard. So it's not intentional. One of the roles that an advocate does, or an attorney, as well, is we go get the information that's missing from the IEP team, and we bring it to the IEP team to help them. It's not that they don't want to help your child. Oftentimes they don't know what the solution is. And I really, and that really is the role of an advocate. Once the solution's there and the district says no, we can go legal. But getting all the right players on the team. So when I say, don't simply trust the IEP team, get more players, get more opinions, and don't accept no. If it's not working, don't accept, no, that we're not going to make any changes.
Absolutely. All right. Slide. Time for some questions.
Okay, so we had a question about fees. Someone wanted to know what your fees are.
That's a great question. Visit my website, schedule an initial consult, and I will go over all that information. For me, I'll let Rich speak for himself.
Yeah, we have information too on our website. It varies. We have a couple attorneys. Like we said, Rose is a law clerk. We have another law clerk starting in a paralegal. It all varies from under $200 an hour upwards to whatever the span is. I think like 600 or something an hour. So it just really depends. More than the hourly rate is how long do you think this is going to be? What's the total cost going to be? And I think having the discussions like that can really help understand, because if I give you an hourly rate, is it going to be 10 hours or 100 hours?
Right.
And I think just understanding that, but that is a really good question. And during the consultation, it absolutely needs to be discussed.
Yeah. And I think to Rich's point, I think we're very similar in that we want to resolve things efficiently and be mindful of time. So like, if I have the option to call a principal or send him a quick email, I'm going to send the email because that takes less time. That's less money out of my client's pocket. If a change needs to be made to an IEP, a small change, I'm not going to request an IEP meeting. I'm going to say, hey, can you update this via a meeting list addendum? Like, not everything has to be a meeting. So I don't know, try to be really mindful of like, last thing I want to do is add financial stress to my clients because they're already dealing with a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Money can cause a lot of stress. So I think, having a clear expectation of what things are going to cost is really, really important.
Okay, we have a question about discrimination. It says, I've noticed that a lot of special ed attorneys do not do discrimination cases. They only do OAH and not civil rights because it is too difficult and takes a long time. Do you have any recommendations to help parents navigate continuous discriminatory practices that districts do? For example, my child is continuously segregated and discriminated.
Yeah, that's because we just handle IDEA cases, right? And we don't go beyond that. We've filed a few OCR complaints, with Office of Civil Rights to bring in an OCR to investigate the school district. There's something in the law, though, if your child has an IEP, called exhaustion. And if you can get the remedy under the IDEA, you have to go that route before you file on other federal statutes. And they do that to pull you out of the courts and put you in administrative court. It keeps the costs down. So it's not as simple as like, oh, what venue do I want to file in? If you have an IEP, and it's really split across the country on this, the different circuits, the Supreme Court should really rule on it at some point. But the Ninth Circuit has its own view of when you have to exhaust through the IDEA. You can't get money damages. You can get compensatory damages. And then, you can't get emotional damages now out of the ADA. So most attorneys are going to have to go the due process route first. If there's a clear separation, and there's no IDEA case, then you can file your discrimination case and other things in federal court. But you just have to talk to an attorney. But we refer clients all the time. You know, we want to, if we can't help, I definitely want to be able to point you in the right direction. And if there really is a clear separation there, then yeah, you should seek out an attorney that can handle that type of litigation.
Okay. And someone in the chat is under the impression that a recent Supreme Court states you do not have to exhaust OAH before doing civil rights.
No, it's not clear. And then the way that we're handling, at least out here in the ninth, that you would still want to exhaust. The last thing you want to do is get thrown out of court for failure to exhaust and just wasted all that time. And remember with the federal courts, right? The federal courts are over impacted. We have a ton of litigation. Criminal case appeals take precedence. Special ed cases and discrimination cases get the back burner. So it takes years to go through the federal courts. If you can get any relief out of IDEA, out of administrative court, that's the venue you want to go anyways. But it's not as clear as you don't have to exhaust. You still, they're trying to come up with a test of when you have to exhaust and when not. It's just not, it's not specifically clear. But I'm happy to have a conversation on an intake call and kind of break it apart.
Okay, how much lead time does an advocate generally need before going to an IEP meeting? I have one in 2 weeks and I'm concerned there may not be enough time.
If you are in Orange County, California, schedule a consult with me. I'd be able to do it within that time frame. If you're not, then please look at the it was on our website's link, the COPA website. You can find a directory for an advocate that practices in your state. Do an initial consultation with that advocate. But yeah, that's plenty of time.
Yeah, and something to remember too, if it's urgent, you have to have the meeting. You can always reschedule the meeting.
Sure.
They have 30 days in California. I'm not sure if it's different in other states to schedule the IEP meeting. So you can reschedule in the next 30 days.
Yeah.
But also you can, we've been rushed into IEP meetings, not fully prepared, but a good advocate, they're going to know what questions to ask, and they don't need a lot of lead time. Have documents and they can't review everything. Just a good conversation with you. They can jump in a meeting and be very impactful.
Absolutely. Somebody's asking for the link. It's on how do I hold on? Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties. It's on the slide. Our websites are on the slide if you want to reach out to us. And then we also have a survey that we're really hoping you'll complete after our webinar, which will give us good information about maybe topics to discuss next webinar. And then at the end of that, it has our contact information if you want to schedule an initial consultation.
And I have one thing Rosa, is there any more questions? Or is that it?
We have 2 more. I think they're pretty short.
Okay.
One is, do mental health issues qualify, or does it have to be a learning disability?
Mental health issues can totally qualify. We would, I think we would need a little bit more information, but that would be under emotional disturbance, or ED would be the eligibility category.
Okay. And the last question is COPA the only way to find an advocate? Are there any resources to find one?
I think we, oh, go ahead, Rich.
I should say California has it on the OAH website. They have a list of advocates and attorneys. If you go to Office of Administrative Hearings, and just probably just Google Office of Administrative Hearings advocate attorney list, it'll probably come up. But we can share that information. But they have a list of at least the ones in California. I also found too, obviously, Googling is going to get a start, but also you can get referrals. You can go to your CAC that I was mentioning, your school district community advisory committee and ask them, and they're going to have referrals as well. Sorry, Sarah, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, but you're good. Another couple things. So you could reach out to a special education attorney and you could say, hey, I don't need an attorney right now, but can you refer me to a good advocate? So most attorneys collaborate with advocates and, you know, pass off cases back and forth. And then, like I mentioned before, if you're on any type of like social media, like special ed groups, especially if it's like for your state, for your region, you can also ask there. I think there's a lot of value in, you know, you can always look someone up on Google and they have good reviews, that's great. But if somebody's referring you because they had, you know, an amazing experience, like that speaks volumes as well.
Yeah, and adding to that too, that's a great idea. You know, on our website, we do have a resource page. It was a few years ago now. We're in the process of updating it with some new interviews, but we have a short podcast, like 18, 20 minutes, where we interviewed a ton of advocates just to share with our families so they could just hear the voice, kind of have them describe their approach, and they vary. So I think reaching out to an attorneys too, any specialist you work with, if you have OT, speech and language, as you know, if you're working with a psychologist, they're also going to have a network and they're going to know attorneys and advocates too. And like you said, just a good referral coming from somebody like that. They've, you know, been vetted for the most part.
Any other questions?
Sarah, I don't have access to the Q&A portion. Someone says that they posted something there.
Oh, I see. If you have a child receiving private therapy related to a disability, for example, ABA therapy at a center, and their center is not offering proper support, what legal expertise should you seek out? If it's not affiliated with the public school district, I think that's a different, like, I'm not sure how to respond to that one, because like we specialize in like public school districts, what they're required to
Wait,
provide.
Sarah,
Want me to
read it
read
one
it?
more time. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me try to.
And then if you want to clarify that in the chat, if I misunderstood that, feel free. So Bryce Mander is asking if you have a child receiving private therapy related to a disability. So for example, ABA therapy at a center and their center is not offering proper support, what legal expertise should you seek out? And then he says, what legal specialty do we need to seek?
Yeah, I would need more information. I mean, if that's, I guess if you're privately paying the agency and they're not connected to the school in any way, change agencies, but I'm sure that's probably not what you're asking. It's insurance funded and you need them to change agencies. I work through the insurance. If it's with the school and